This is quite a daunting privilege here with two Esthers. They can probably sit here left and right to me, but you know,
No. Then you can look at both of us.
Oh yeah, Esther, what do you think?
How do we do
Esther
this?
D, Esther
Esther
W.
D and Esther W.
Now we just talked about the amazing things that we can do to the brain. Now you're about putting it to use with two mind shifts that we're going to talk about in a moment. Two mind shifts, one in health and one in education. And I think we're going to see over the course of the next 25 or 30 minutes how they converge. So we start from one point, go out to your two fields, and then we'll see what actually underlies both of these shifts. So there's much in common. Esther Wojcicki, you have 30 years in journalism. It's just
That's
a brief introducing you at Palo Alto, and you have grown the program there from the journalism program from 19 to 600 students, and they started in a trailer park. So you'll talk about that amazing success story in a moment, but we'll start with Esther Dyson, who Steffi has confided in me is partly responsible for everything here today because you inspired her to...
The good parts. I'm responsible for the good parts.
Right, okay.
Which is most of it.
All of it. Talking about health today. And you need no introduction at DLD, really, because people know so many different sides of you, but there's this more recent side now with the Hiccup project, and which you've named. The Hiccup is the organization, I believe, and the project is named The Way to Wellville. Which, you know, I read the T.C. Boyle book. I'm not sure that was that was your inspiration. So to remind people, in '93, T.C. Boyle wrote a book, The Road to Wellville, which is extraordinary. It placed 100 years ago in the early days of is the invention of cornflakes, and it happens in this very strange sanatorium, and Eleanor and Will are the main protagonists, and there's the guru, and they react very differently to the guru. Strange things go on: electrocutions in the name of health, sensual massages in the name of health, and of course lots of cornflakes. How are the two Wellvilles connected over the course of a century? Not very much.
What happened was I started Hiccup, which stands for Health Initiative Coordinating Council, 2 years ago, and it's a nonprofit. I've seen lots of nice nonprofits by very nice people do absolutely nothing because the person who started them didn't bring in someone who knew how to manage a real thing and make it happen. So I brought in a CEO. And he said, that's a very nice, clever name, Esther, but nobody knows what it means, so let's call our project The Way to Wellville. Mm-hmm. And that's how it happened.
So in The Road to Wellville, there's one guru who has all the solutions and has people try out all the solutions. In your Wellville, it's very different, isn't it?
So I also, as a journalist, tribute to the other Esther.
That's good.
And as a journalist, I sort of despise is too strong a word, but I think the best way to persuade people of stuff is to show them the truth, and then they will come to their own conclusions. And we know the truth. We know that eating right, getting enough sleep, helping people deal with mental illness or addiction, you know, all this stuff will give people the gift, the asset of health. But why don't we do it? So I wanted to show what it looks like when we do it. Not go take a Fitbit and show some self-discipline, but what's it like when the community and the vendors around you support your health rather than eroding it? Because modern life, you know, conferences, too much food, too much drink, not enough time, you're always on the internet, too many temptations, they erode your health. And we wanted to see what it was like when the community produced health. So we put out a call for communities that wanted to do this. It wasn't a nice white lady from New York is here to tell you how to live, but more, oh, so you want to produce health, we'll act like an incubator and help you to do that. We got 42 communities that applied. These are all US communities because we wanted to limit the complexities, and if you want to copy it in Germany, I'd be delighted if other communities want to copy it. But we're doing it in 5 places, 5 startups in the business of producing health. And the motto is that don't rent your health, invest in it. Your health is an asset, just like a house that gives you a place to live and gives you also the ability not to pay rent because you live in this place. You invested in it, and now it produces value for you. In the same way, your health produces the ability to resist the stress of modern life. And yes, at some point it will break down, but all the conversations I'm hearing today are, how do you fix something when it's broken? It's as if we focused entirely on emergency medicine and, when there are plane crashes, how can we get better at picking people up off the ground and finding them?
How can we prevent the plane crash?
Yeah.
So how can we prevent our plane crashes?
There's no mystery.
You said investing, but you
Yeah.
also said costs. But those
So the
go
cost-
together. But there's something missing there, isn't it?
Well, there's the return. So
Yes.
the cost of eliminating diabetes is fundamentally the cost of healthy food plus the cost of creating an environment where the healthy food costs less, where it's easily available, where they serve it at school. Kids
That'd be
learn a
great.
lot better when they eat right.
So how many, you said you have 5 communities?
Yeah.
And did they get the cooperation of all the members of the community?
No.
So this was,
So who did apply, not the whole
point is-
community?
No, this is
Yeah.
not a test. This is an application.
I thought it was the way of life. No?
Okay, but so imagine in school, they serve bad food.
All the time.
Let's serve good food. We don't need to test that. We don't need to do an independent review board. Frankly, the food that we're feeding children now makes them sick, and we know it makes them sick. And I don't know morally how we can do that, but we do. So the idea is to start serving healthy food in schools, doing things like prenatal care and advice, helping teenagers not to get pregnant in the first place.
And the communities figure this out themselves, don't they?
They
You
figure it
guide
out.
them in what way?
Okay, so 2 restaurants.
2 what?
2
Restaurants.
restaurants. How to run a restaurant is not a mystery. At the same time, there's a big difference between running a restaurant well and running a restaurant poorly. So we help them run the restaurant well. In many communities, people simply don't know how to be accountable for results. How to have a plan, make someone responsible for the plan, measure the outcomes, and in the case of health, also look at how you avoid the costs and create investment vehicles where you pay up front to avoid the costs later, just like you invest in a house early.
So you give them a couple of tools, then these cities, these communities, they
Yes.
also they learn from each other supposedly. I've seen the blog.
Yeah.
Everybody should look up the blog and see what's happening.
Hiccup.co.
It's early
Yeah.
days for the project.
Yeah.
And you support it through technology, tools, outcomes.
Less technology,
Measurement.
more just management skills, communication skills, working together. And yes, getting the community residents to buy in. But it is not telling people how to make choices. It's making the healthy choices easy to make.
In the schools, for example, how do you convince the kids not to eat the bad food?
You don't serve bad food. And you make them hungry
So
until
wait,
they
okay,
finally
so-
eat the good stuff.
So you have, you've got the cooperation of the schools and the school board,
Yeah.
that you've cut out the bad food.
Yeah, not yet.
Oh,
I mean, believe, and you don't need perfection. You just need something much better than what we have today. There's a huge obesity problem in the U.S. You've probably noticed. It's
I've seen it.
starting in Germany, in Mexico,
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, India.
it's all the, yeah,
Lots. Fundamentally, too
sugar.
much sugar.
right.
So you're saying there's a mind shift that needs to happen from thinking about health as the absence of illness to something that we actually invest in,
Yes.
we accumulate over
And-
time, and we measure, and and you say we know many of the things, but we
Right.
have to organize these communities in a different way to actually do it.
Yeah, because, I mean, we've evolved, human beings, until the last 100 years, they were always hungry, probably too cold. And so when they found food, they would just eat whatever they could find, and especially sugar. And now we just have too
then
much
came
of
cornflakes.
it. Yeah. And our bodies are our biggest vulnerability because they like stuff that's not good for us. And unfortunately, it's profitable to sell them that bad stuff. And what we're doing as collective action in our communities, I think ultimately probably is going to have to be government interference and taxing sugar or something like that.
This is really interesting because some of the patterns you're talking about, I think, are not similar to some of the patterns you're attacking in your work. I've introduced you by introducing your journalism work, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about that mind shift that needs to happen. Again, we know a lot about how classrooms should work differently. Maybe you can help us a bit, but there still seems to be a major mind shift that needs to happen. And when you talk about your work, we also have a few slides that can illustrate the amazing outcomes from some of it.
Mm-hmm. So there has to be a mind shift, I think, in what you're doing as well. People have to accept this idea that they want to live a healthy life, mm-hmm. and that they don't want to drink soda all the time. It's kind of, it's a big mind shift.
And it's thinking long term, and and it's boring. The audience has actually gone down considerably since I started.
They're all watching on their screens.
This is not. No, they aren't. It's not high tech. It's not exciting. It's not brain science. It's
getting them to cooperate. So I can talk a little bit about what's going on in education and what I've been doing. And basically, I have a large program. I started with 19 students, as you said, in 1984, and then 30 years later, I have the largest media program in the United States. And so the question is, like, why did they all come? You know, what's the motivation? So we need to figure out, like, what's the motivation that's going to change their behavior patterns in food. So my motivation is, why do they want to come into this program? And the answer really is that I have, as a teacher, I've relinquished some control in the classroom to the students. And I don't know anybody in the world, any human being that is, that doesn't like to be in control. Mm-hmm. And so what we've got going in the schools today, worldwide, not just in America or Germany, is that the education system is given by a professor or a teacher who's in charge of the class, and the whole system is the teacher lectures, and then when students participate, they raise their hand, and then the whole thing goes from the student to the teacher, and then the next student mm-hmm. to the teacher, and the next student to the teacher. It's the lecture system. And so I would just bet that most of you who experienced this either daydreamed, fell asleep, or the research shows that you only got 20% of what the teacher said. So what I've done is I decided that because the research also shows that 80% of the learning takes place outside the classroom, I brought the outside into the classroom. In other words, I brought the collaboration into the classroom. And so the majority of my class students collaborate, and they work together as teams. And I use journalism just as a platform to get them motivated, because then they get to write about whatever they want to write about. We still have, sort of freedom of the press in America, sort of. And so that's the basis.
Let's show some of the things your students have been producing.
So this is an.
You can see them here too.
Did it come up there?
Right, but
oh no,
it's going to come up here in a moment.
So it turns out that if you give students an opportunity to be in control, they will take the initiative and do it. So this is, if you go back a couple of slides, just one more.
That's the first.
Back, one more. This is Agora. This was just started by students 2 years ago in my classes. They started a foreign affairs magazine. Now, would you ever expect like 16 and 17-year-olds to do that? Never. But they decided this is something that they wanted to do. And so not only did they start the magazine, it's in hardcover, it's also online. And This is the student newspaper that comes out every 2 weeks. This is a website that's updated every day. And you can only see the first part of it because it's just a screenshot. But actually, go back. So the other thing, so you can see that they have all these different sections. It's a huge website with a lot of content, all produced by students. Then the next slide is we teach video production because the main thing that students want to do today is learn how to use that thing in their pocket, you know, the cell phone. So teach like how to make movies using cell phones, how to use all different devices. You can use an iPad, so forth. And then we have a film festival for them to demonstrate whatever. So in doing all this, this is another website that we have a lot of websites. The other thing is that they still produce an old-fashioned newspaper. Comes out every couple of weeks. It's 28 pages, 3 sections. This is the front page of the paper. This is all done by students given the power and control to do it themselves. They're learning by collaborating with each other. I provide the structure. I teach the tools. They actually do a lot of the tools themselves because if you want to learn how to use InDesign on Adobe, I give them websites that they can go to and learn that. You know, you have to learn how to learn in this society. If you go back 1, 2, so this is another magazine they just started.
Advertising?
Yeah, they're copying the T magazine from the New York Times. This looks like a T, but it's C, right? So they copied it. The guy on the left with the big beard, I said to them, that looks like Santa Claus to me. But it turns out he's a homeless guy in Palo Alto. Yes, we have homeless people in Palo Alto. And they came up with all these topics themselves. They write about things that matter. This is a sports magazine that they've created. And the reason that they did the sports magazine, or I did it, is because I had a hard time getting the boys involved. And so the boys all like to do sports. And not only that, they like to write about each other on the sports magazine. So this is in hard copy as well as online. And this is all taken by kids. This is not produced professionally. And this is also, again, produced by students. Ages 14 to 18, usually the group of students that everybody has a hard time talking about.
So let's just try to understand how big the contrast is between your work and what typically happens. So one of the most Googled terms by teachers is classroom control, isn't that right? So what you're doing is is helping them help each other as peers learn. And you mentioned that now, of course, every kid is smarter than their teacher because they've got the power of technology and the internet at their
so
fingertips.
I don't fight with them. You know,
yeah.
I don't have a control issue. I should also say that there's 5 other teachers in this program. It's not just me. So I'm the leader, but I'm not the only one. It can happen anywhere. You know, it can happen. Apparently here in Germany, they also have some programs where they're starting this kind of collaborative learning and giving kids more control. The more that you do, the more you are going to get students who graduate who are actually thinkers and creators and innovators. And that's what the employment world is looking for. That's what job...
And you're talking about the bigger mind shift and so also very practical things in your book, Moonshots in Education. I bought it. Everybody should buy it. Moonshots in Education.
Right.
It's available on Amazon.
Yes.
And what is that mind shift? So this seems simple enough, right? So social entrepreneurs across the world have been at this problem for decades, if not, we're in Germany, so the home of the reform school movement, over 100 years ago. Reform educators have said, put kids in charge and stop frontal classrooms. And so what are the barriers? Why are we not? Why does it take you to do this? And why isn't this common practice everywhere? Why do I remember my boredom and my absenteeism?
The number one barrier to this kind of education is really the testing. We're all concerned about the test scores. And it's called the PISA test, the Personal International Student Assessment Test. And the number one country in the world on that test is Finland and Shanghai. And so that's part of what's going on, that they all want to have top scores. And so Schools are teaching to the test. They're memorizing.
So as a parent, I want to know how my kids, I've got 2 kids who are entering school, so I want to know, are they going to a good school or a bad school? So I can hold these 2 truths in my head at the same time. I would like there to be some testing so I know they're doing okay, but I also understand the virtues of the type of classroom you're suggesting. So how do you fit the 2 together?
So it's called blended learning. That's why it's called a blend. It's a blend of traditional methods together with the computer and technology, and it turns out that it produces higher test results. So you see kids learn when they do things like you saw right here. Research shows that if you just listen to somebody or watch somebody, that's not as effective. So if, for example, you want to learn how to ride a bike, if you go and read a book on how to ride a bike, is that going to work for you? Or if you want to learn how to swim.
That's how I tried it, though, actually.
Can you learn to swim by reading a book? And so, this is part of you learn by doing, and then whatever it is that you might have learned in the 50% of the time that the lecture was taking place is implemented right away. So then it sticks. So in your keeping healthy living in the school, in the communities, there needs to be some kind of a motivator.
Yeah.
Something that's going to actually make them stick to whatever it is.
Well, to what you were saying, I would say probably the best way to learn is to teach.
Right.
I mean, I certainly found the best way to learn anything was to be a journalist and to have to write about it. So, whatever it is they're learning, you learn how to learn when you're teaching other kids, you're writing for people.
So when they're peer-to-peer interactions, they're teaching each other.
Precisely.
And
so
that's
how we
exactly
learn.
right.
And, I mean, we had a similar issue around testing because our question is, well, how do you...
Between the Wellville communities.
Yeah, how do you measure the impact? What metrics should we use? And we went back and forth on this for a long time, and then we finally found this organization that is a whole bunch of healthcare people, lots of very famous academics and so forth, and we said, whatever, and they have a 100 million healthier lives campaign that we think is probably overambitious versus 5 small communities of under 100,000 people each. We said, whatever they measure, we'll work with it, because sort of like you, if we actually make these communities healthy, it doesn't matter what you measure, they will come out as having been healthier. And if you actually make these kids well-educated young adults, they'll do well on a test, whatever it is, even if they're not working towards that test.
Well, the education is actually at the base of what you're trying to do. So if you want them to eat well, they have to be able to research online and understand.
Sure, and they have to cook.
They have to cook, but they also have to, they're on their phones 100%
excuse me,
of
Esther,
the time.
honestly, I'm not trying to educate everybody in these communities. Half these people, they're busy, they're taking their kids to school, they may be drug addicts, they are not concerned about health. So they need an environment around them that makes it easy to do the right thing, even if they're not consciously counting the nutrients in the carrots.
So in other words, you would just have a Whole Foods-like store available on...
It's a little broader than that. No, I mean, fundamentally, we want Walmart, the big American retailer, to sell healthy food.
Okay.
Because otherwise, it's not going to work. If people have to consciously think about being healthy, they just have other things on their minds.
But the number one problem in the world today really is that soda. People are drinking soda like
right.
mad.
And
Can't
sugar.
we just get rid of
tax
it?
sugar, yes.
Right.
But in order to tax sugar, you need political will.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that in order to have political will, you need to see what it looks like when...
Okay, so this is, now we can dedicate the last few minutes to the obvious problem here. We only have 2 Esthers doing this kind of work, and everybody should do this kind of work. At Ashoka, we have, it's a typical thing we ask ourselves, and you've been at globalizer programs where we try to globalize solutions.
How do you spread the impact?
So how do you go from a great example, a local example, whether it's 5 Wellvilles or a fantastic journalism program with a new building and online outreach and being invited to conferences such as this one, how do you go to changing policy, giving more time to free and open classroom education, getting rid of the getting rid of the soda pops and
making
all
the
rest.
results visible.
Yes.
And then the usual, get Oprah to put us on her show. Once we've been successful, we want the world to see it, and then maybe Hiccup 2 becomes a lobbying organization or something. But first you need to inspire people, then they'll change.
Well, it seems to me you could actually complement each other a little bit. You could
Your guys can write about
insert
it.
a journalism
My
program
students.
into every Wellville and.
Right. Actually, it's not just journalism, it's all subject areas. Kids, doing math and science and whatever, they also need to be able to do it and not just read about it. So it's this philosophy of doing in the classroom that is more effective than, and journalism just happens to be a vehicle to teach these skills.
Yeah.
But it could be, science. They should be doing this. There's so much stuff online. Why aren't they using that?
One thing we want to do is have each first grade have 4 mice, and 2 eat well, and 2 eat sugar and potato chips, and 2 of them have an exercise wheel, and 2 of them are sedentary. And then after 3 months, we hope that we get sued by people for ethical treatment of animals. And that's how we'll generate publicity.
The kids can see what happens to the mice.
Yes,
the
exactly.
fat mouse
Yes,
versus the
right.
Well,
And
maybe
the
that's
healthy mouse.
maybe
the
that's an
healthy
important
mouse,
ingredient. To
exactly.
Create,
do it yourself.
Create the control groups,
Yeah.
and then trust people
Do it
to
yourself.
actually
Learn.
do it themselves and learn. And you both believe in the power of doing it earlier, starting early in
should
life.
start in elementary school. What you're doing should start like
Prenatal.
prenatal.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the first environment the kid has is in the womb. And if the mother is stressed, there's lots of evidence showing that if your mother's stressed, the percentage of people that become addicted to something is much higher. I mean, and that perpetuates itself. So you have, in the United States now, half the children are poor as defined by the legislation that gives you free health care. And that's horrifying.
Well, the free health care is nothing anybody would really want.
No, you don't want to be qualified for it. Forget the
Right.
health care itself. It's
Right.
simply they're poor and they have bad educations. And so right now in the U.S., to live a normal life, you need to be lucky. And we want to change it so that to live a normal life is normal.
So this is the first generation that is apparently supposed to live for a shorter period of time than their parents. Are you aware of that?
And unhealthier, yeah.
Unhealthier and
Unhealthier,
shorter.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's at the moment in time when more of us have more time, better health, are better educated, more
But we
mobile, and better
don't.
connected than ever before.
getting
so
worse.
we could do all this. But
Yeah.
Thanks for your inspiration. We need more Esthers, and I think we've learned a ton. Are you available to people afterwards to talk about health, education,
Right.
the small
I'd be
things we
happy
need
to
to
talk
do?
about this book of mine, Moonshots in Education. So Moonshot is, can we change the culture of the classroom so that students can have some more agency no matter what the classroom is?
The book is available.
It's
and you should read
it's
it.
on Amazon. Yeah.
All right. Go buy the book, talk to the Esthers, and thank you very,
And
very much.
visit hiccup.co.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a ton. Thanks a lot.